It's no secret that Ukraine faces some serious challenges when trying to deal with Russia's ballistic missiles. Those missiles keep coming and Ukraine lacks the interceptors it needs to shoot them down. Does that mean that Russia is winning this aspect of the war? Maybe it was a few weeks ago, but ever able to adapt, Ukraine has decided to tackle Russia's ballistic missiles a different way. If you can't take them down in the sky, destroy them before they are able to launch. Ukraine has found a genius way to destroy dozens of Russian missiles with a single blow. But even more than that, we're seeing Ukraine continue its transformation from a defensive nation to one capable of going on an all-out offensive to achieve victory. It all starts close to the border between Russia and Ukraine. On August 22nd, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy revealed that the Ukrainian military had carried out a successful strike against an Iskander ballistic missile launch site somewhere along the border. Today, we have another success. We cannot provide many details because of the operation's sensitivity, but a fact is a fact. We struck an Iskander launcher near our borders, Zelenskyy declared. Ukraine's president didn't provide any more details. We don't know where the site was specifically. Zelenskyy says that's due to operational security concerns, as Ukraine doesn't want to give away too many details about how it's conducting these strikes. After all, details mean information that Russia can use to defend itself. On the surface, the strike against an Iskander launch site appears to be the headline, and we don't want to underplay the importance of the attack itself. Iskander ballistic missiles are some of the most lethal weapons that Russia brings to the table. Whenever we hear about the latest aerial attack carried out by Russia, we almost always hear that Iskanders were part of the strike. With their stated range of about 500 kilometers and the ability to deliver both conventional and nuclear warheads weighing up to 700 kilograms, Iskanders provide Russia with the ability to do a lot of damage, often against Ukrainian cities rather than military targets, in a single attack. Russia recognizes the importance of these particular weapons even more than Ukraine. Ballistic missiles like the Iskander are difficult to shoot out of the sky. They must be countered by special types of interceptor missiles. Knowing that Ukraine doesn't have stockpiles of those interceptors, Russia has gone all in on building as many as it can. According to the Kyiv Independent, Russia likely has between 600 and 630 ballistic missiles in its stockpile. Pravda adds that around 130 of Russia's ballistic missiles are Iskanders. And according to Zelenskyy, Russia could potentially produce up to 1,300 annually, though Zelenskyy says that Russia hasn't reached that level of production yet. But it could, and that's a problem that Ukraine needs to solve. This is where the real headline that lies behind the Iskander launch site strike comes into play. It's the strategy behind this strike that really matters, not so much the strike itself. With this single attack, we've just seen Ukraine conduct a complete turnaround in its approach to Russia's ballistic missiles. Instead of being on defense, which is what you have to do when relying on interceptor missiles to shoot ballistic missiles out of the sky, Ukraine is instead going on the offense. It's attacking Russia's launch sites. Or to put it another way, Ukraine is going to start shooting the archers instead of the arrows. We made a bold claim at the beginning of the video that Ukraine has just figured out how to destroy dozens of missiles with a single blow. This is how you do it. The missiles don't have to be destroyed directly, rather Ukraine can focus on taking out the launchers. Without those launchers, the missiles become useless to Russia, effectively destroying them in the sense that they can't be used to damage Ukraine anymore. And Zelenskyy says that this is precisely what Ukraine is going to be doing from now on. So this is one of the options when we have very few anti-ballistic missiles. There is another tactic, a more difficult one that we developed, hunting their nearby sites from which they launch ballistic missiles. This is a separate story, a separate program, a separate operation. And today we managed to do it. Our defense forces did a great job, Zelenskyy said in the wake of the August 22nd strike. This followed on from a similar declaration on August 5th, when Ukraine's president said that military personnel know that they need to destroy enemy launchers to reduce Russia's ballistic missile threat. This is a brilliant move by Ukraine. For one thing, it counters increased missile production, which has escalated in recent months due to Ukraine's interceptor stockpile shortages that we'll be getting to in a moment. But beyond that, there's the Iskander itself to consider. There's a reason why the launch site that Ukraine destroyed was close to the border. You may have picked up on that reason when we shared the Iskander's range. Iskander missiles can travel 500 kilometers. And while that might sound like a lot, what it means is that Russia is somewhat limited in where it can place its launchers for them to be usable. Crimea has Iskander launch sites, as do many of Russia's border regions, but beyond that, there's no point building any more as the Iskander can't travel far enough. For Ukraine, what this means is a narrowing down of its target area. The Archers are easily in range of Ukraine's drones, so Ukraine's task is now to identify where the launch sites are. Once that information is at hand, Ukraine's drones can do the rest. Though Zelenskyy has shared this strategy as though it's brand new, there have been hints that Ukraine was trying something like what we've just heard about earlier in 2026. Back in April, Ukraine carried out a far-reaching strike that took out multiple Russian targets in Crimea, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. All in a day's work for Ukraine in 2026, as strikes against these occupied territories are carried out almost daily to weaken Russia's forces on the front. But what made this particular strike interesting was what happened in Crimea. Located near the settlements of Kurotna and Mizirya were a pair of bases that hosted Iskander missile systems. Both were home to launchers, and Ukraine took them out in its attack. Perhaps a hint of what was to come. Now, just a few months later, Ukraine has done it again, only this time the attack on an Iskander launcher wasn't an isolated incident. Zelenskyy says that Ukraine is going all in on its new strategy, and he signaled that intention by trying to call on the man who may be able to help Ukraine take out more Iskander launchers in the future, Elon Musk. That's according to the Financial Times, which says that Russia is now seeking approval from Musk and SpaceX to use Starlink-enabled drones for strikes against Russia's ballistic missile launchers up to 200 kilometers inside Russian territory. This is a big ask for Ukraine. Though SpaceX finally cut off Russia's use of illicit Starlink terminals inside Ukraine earlier in 2026, it has historically banned Ukraine from using Starlink-equipped drones inside Russia itself. Those drones are for defending Ukraine. Musk and SpaceX likely don't want to risk incurring Russia's wrath for allowing them to be used inside Russian territory. Zelenskyy hopes that he can change Musk's mind. As Zelenskyy put it on August 22nd, so far he has said that this constitutes an escalation. However, he may change his mind once he sees further arguments. Zelenskyy wants to present those arguments to the point where he even asked US President Donald Trump to speak to Musk on Ukraine's behalf when he visited the White House back in July. Even back then, the pitch was to allow strikes 200 kilometers beyond the border, and ballistic missile launch sites were named, along with command systems and other assets. Musk hasn't commented since Zelenskyy made it clear what he wants. For Ukraine, this Starlink permission could be huge for the new strategy. Due to using SpaceX satellites, which boast stronger connections than traditional radio links, Starlink enables drone operators to have their drones cover long distances while enjoying more resistance to jamming. Zelenskyy's challenge here is that the man who negotiated the Russian Starlink shutdown in February, Mikhailo Fedorov, is no longer Ukraine's defense minister. Fedorov has a direct link to Musk and may be able to present the arguments that Ukraine needs to present, but he hasn't returned to government despite Zelenskyy offering him various government roles, including the position of deputy prime minister. Fedorov might be the key to making Ukraine's new strategy work. At the very least, he could present the arguments for why Starlink should be allowed for strikes inside Russia. But even without him, Ukraine has just proven that it can take out an Iskander launch site. And if Ukraine can do it once, it can do it again. Ukraine needs to. This strategic transformation hasn't come out of nowhere. It's a shift in approach born from necessity rather than choice, but it's also a shift that reflects what Ukraine has been doing throughout 2026. Before we dig into all of that, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. There's a lot more where this comes from, so make sure you subscribe and enable notifications if you're getting value from the channel. We'll be completely blunt here. Ukraine has a serious missile interceptor problem. If Ukraine has an Achilles heel in its fight against Russia, it's that it has to rely heavily on its Western partners for interceptor missiles that can be used to destroy Russia's ballistic missiles in flight. And chief among those interceptors are Patriot missiles. Ukraine basically doesn't have any of them left. CNN reports that Ukraine's stockpiles have run dry, meaning it has Patriot missile batteries, but they aren't able to do anything. It's the inverse of the problem that Ukraine wants to create for Russia. Ukraine has the launchers but no missiles. It wants Russia to have its missiles but no way to launch them. According to Zelenskyy himself, Ukraine needs 5% of the stockpile of Patriot missiles that the US has to survive the winter. Right now, it only has enough missiles to amount to 1% of that stockpile. This is the catalyst for Ukraine's change in approach. The lack of Patriot interceptors is already starting to cause major problems for Ukraine. Russian missiles rain down on Ukraine weekly, and they're causing a lot more death and destruction than they were earlier in the year. That's what Putin wants. The entire point of Russia's aerial campaign is to terrorize Ukraine, to cow its people into submission by breaking their morale and destroying their homes. The Guardian says that there is now a constant air of anxiety that clouds Kyiv, as Russian missiles break through the city's defenses with alarming regularity. The latest of those strikes, which took place on August 20th, left 17 people dead and several dozen wounded. Ukraine saw this coming. It started rationing its Patriot interceptor missiles as far back as April, which is when Euromaidan press reported that Ukraine was pulling Patriot crews mid-attack to preserve interceptor missiles for future Russian strikes. Ukraine has also started using Patriot interceptors in ways that were never intended, such as using a single missile to attack a target rather than the 2 to 4 that are typically required. On one hand, this shows just how competent Ukraine's Patriot crews have become, and it bodes well for a future where Ukraine has more interceptors. But on the other hand, it's a sign of how bad the Patriot shortage is. What we're seeing now from Ukraine is the adaptation. Something that Ukraine has mastered during its war with Russia is the ability to see a situation and come up with a novel solution when the original solution no longer works out. Attacking ballistic missile launch sites eases the pressure on Ukraine's depleted Patriot missile stockpiles. The immediate goal is to create a situation where Russia is unable to maintain its volume of attacks due to launchers being destroyed, allowing for the preservation of Patriot missiles for the fewer attacks that are unleashed. It's not the perfect situation for Ukraine, but it will do for now. Ukraine is working toward a future where it will be able to combine its targeting of Russia's ballistic missile launch sites with an air defense approach that includes Patriot missiles once more. Indeed, there are more Patriot missiles coming. According to TVP World, Ukraine and Germany have just signed a deal that will see Germany provide Ukraine with 600 PAC-2 interceptor missiles. However, those missiles won't start arriving in Ukraine until 2027, and the full delivery may not be completed until 2028. That means they won't be coming in time for that crucial winter period that Zelenskyy mentioned. Again, that leads to the new strategy. If Ukraine can take out enough launch sites between now and the winter, Russia's threat diminishes, and the Patriot problem doesn't bite as hard. More will be needed, of course. Zelenskyy has made that much clear as he is calling on Western nations that implement new sanctions to cause more issues for Russia's defense supply chain. Pressure is needed on every supply chain for foreign components and every enterprise working to enable strikes against lives, Ukraine's president wrote on Facebook in an August 14th post. There is a clear logic to these calls. Russia needs to build its missiles and its launchers before it can attack Ukraine. With this new strategy, Ukraine takes out launch sites to render Russia's ballistic missiles useless. What it also wants is for the West to work harder at cutting these pieces of equipment off at their source, which would lead to Russia struggling to send replacement launchers after Ukraine carries out a strike. The ideal is the combination of 3 layers: take out the source, destroy the launchers, and have enough interceptors at hand to shoot down the arrows when Russia manages to fire them. Work has to be done to bring all 3 of these elements together. However, the adaptation that Ukraine has made shows that it's taking a new approach to its air defense. It's no longer wait and shoot down, it's find and disrupt. Ukraine is going on the offense as it carves out a path to victory. Russia might be surprised by the attack on an Iskander launch site. It shouldn't be. That attack is simply the next step in a complete shift in Ukraine's approach, as offense has defined the best things that Ukraine has done in 2026. There are plenty of examples. Take Crimea. For much of the mid-portion of the year, Ukraine has been engaged in a campaign to isolate the Crimean Peninsula, cutting off fuel supplies to make this key piece of territory strategically useless, all while letting the occupiers in Crimea know that Putin can't protect them. This is an offensive strategy. Ukraine has been striking trucks, ships, and roads. These proactive attacks are now causing Russia a lot of problems in Crimea, and they wouldn't be happening if Ukraine was still in the defensive mindset that it has held throughout the war. The development of middle strike drones capable of striking targets up to 250 kilometers away from the front has made this attacking strategy possible, and Ukraine is making the most of it. We see something similar in Ukraine's strikes against Wildberries and more recently Ozon. Together, these 2 companies form the backbone of Russia's e-commerce logistics. They're used by millions of people and they employ thousands. Since July 18th, Ukraine has recorded at least 20 strikes against Wildberries facilities, doing billions of dollars of damage in the process. The company has lost over 1.18 million square meters of warehouse space, The Conversation reports. Again, this is offense. Direct attacks on Russian territory that do impact the front in the sense that they hit companies that sell military gear. But more importantly, and similar to what we see in Crimea, these attacks bring more pain to the Russian people without targeting them directly. We've also seen Ukraine go on the offensive on its own turf. Since the Starlink shutdown we mentioned, Ukraine has been launching targeted attacks against weak points across the Russian front line, resulting in large amounts of territory being liberated. On August 12th, Zelenskyy revealed that Ukraine has retaken 745 square kilometers of territory in the Alexandrivka direction alone since January, along with liberating 26 settlements. These counters allow Ukraine to fortify and set up later attacks. We don't mean to harp the point, but it's yet another offensive strategy. Rather than only waiting for Russia to attack so that Ukraine can inflict damage through its defense, Ukraine is actively going on the offense to inflict damage while still using its defense to attrip Russia's forces. What we're seeing with the targeting of Russia's ballistic missile launch sites is simply the next evolution in this offensive approach. That evolution has been made possible by Ukraine's growing arsenal of long-range drones and drone missile hybrids. Ukraine now has weapons capable of striking up to 3,000 kilometers inside Russia. Those weapons won't need to travel so far to destroy Iskander launch sites due to the limited range of these types of missiles. However, it does open up possibilities for Ukraine to conduct attacks against facilities that manufacture missiles and components deeper in Russia, which feeds into the idea of cutting Russia's missile attacks off at the source. It all boils down to one important realization. Ukraine knows that it isn't going to win this war with defense alone. Putin has already demonstrated that he's willing to sacrifice the lives of as many Russians as it takes to achieve his goals. Almost 1.48 million casualties and counting are evidence of that. If Ukraine does nothing but defend, Putin will simply keep sending in the meat for as long as he is able. Ukraine may be able to kill hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions more, but it will lose soldiers and equipment while doing it, perhaps enough for Russia to achieve the attritional victory that Putin seems to desire. So offense is needed. That simple concept has been the defining aspect of Ukraine's 2026 strategy. Now Iskander missile launch sites are in Ukraine's crosshairs. Zelenskyy has just reported on one strike. Look for more in the coming weeks and months as Ukraine's attacks whittle away at Russia's aerial capabilities. By the way, we dug a lot deeper into Ukraine's counterattacks in the south. It's not just about the 745 square kilometers. Ukraine has shattered the Russian narrative with its offensives, and you can find out how by watching our video. But before you go, subscribe and tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you want even more from the channel, consider becoming a member for access to exclusive content. And thank you, as always, for watching.